The boy threw his shoes into the school trash can. He thought the stitching looked too ugly, but when the teacher saw him coming to class barefoot, she immediately lashed his feet with a whip.
Where are your shoes?
Don't know, sir.
Of course you know, boy. Where are they?
Forced by the teacher's punishment, Frank had no choice but to dig his shoes back out of the trash. The moment his classmates saw those ragged shoes which looked like they had been chewed apart by a dog, the whole classroom burst into laughter.
Do I hear sneering in this class? Do I hear jeering at another's misfortune? Is there any boy in this class who thinks he's perfect? If so, raise your hands. No. There are boys in this class who have no shoes at all. And it's not their fault. It's not their shame.
Even though the teacher tried her best to help him save face, Frank still couldn't feel any better, because if nothing changed, he would probably have to keep wearing those shoes for several more years. Frank's family was desperately poor. Ever since he could remember, he had never eaten a truly full meal. Yet despite barely having enough food to survive, his mother seemed to have a new baby almost every year. In just 4 years, she gave birth to 5 more children. To make matters worse, his father was a man with unrealistic expectations. The jobs that paid well were beyond his abilities, and the jobs that paid little were beneath his pride. He spent his days doing nothing, and brought home no income at all. As a result, his youngest sister died of starvation just days after she was born, because there was no money for formula. The pain of losing a child, combined with crushing poverty, forced Frank's father to make a difficult decision. He left America, a country countless people dreamed of living in, and returned to his wife's homeland of Ireland to search for a better life. The family even had to borrow money from Frank's grandmother just to pay for the trip. Unfortunately, the elderly woman could barely support herself. No matter how much she wanted to help, she simply couldn't feed such a large family. All she could do was lend them 10 shillings for rent, so they would at least have a temporary place to stay. But because they moved into the house without cleaning it first, Frank's twin brothers were bitten by lice all night long and cried non-stop. Even though Frank and his father cleaned the mattresses afterward, one of the twins developed a high fever the very next day. Frank's mother told her husband to get some coal so they could boil water. After finally obtaining a coal assistance voucher, they arrived only to discover that the coal yard had just closed. Frank wanted to pick up the pieces of coal scattered on the ground, but his father immediately stopped him. He told Frank that a man should have pride. Picking up coal from the ground was something only beggars did. When the father and son returned empty-handed, disappointment was written all over Frank's mother's face. No matter how hard life became, she had never once complained. But now their child was sick and needed hot water. Yet her husband's first concerns was his ridiculous sense of pride. Without hesitation, she took her 2 oldest sons to the coal yard and filled 2 large sacks with coal. She wanted to show her husband that when survival is on the line, pride is worthless. Sadly, despite her efforts, the child eventually died from the illness. As Frank watched his brother's tiny coffin slowly disappear beneath the dirt, he understood the meaning of death for the first time. He knew that just like his sister before, he would never see him again. That same day, Frank's father claimed he was going out to look for work. Instead, he used the funeral money relatives had given for the child to get drunk at a pub. So even though the family had one less mouth to feed, their financial situation never improved. Frank's father still refused to take jobs he considered beneath him. He spent his days praying for sudden wealth, instead of earning a living. As a result, his other twin brother contracted tuberculosis and died because they couldn't afford medical treatment. After losing 2 children, the family could no longer bear living in the same house. Because Frank's mother had local residency status, she applied for government assistance. But when officials learned that her husband was not from the area, they approved only a few pieces of second-hand furniture and a rental house that almost nobody wanted. The front door stood right beside a public restroom. More than a dozen nearby households dumped their chamber pots there. In winter, it was barely tolerable. In summer, the smell was absolutely unbearable. But as an impoverished family, they had no choice. The only bright side was that Frank and his brother were finally allowed to attend school for free. Soon spring arrived in Ireland. Days of non-stop rain, combined with the area's low elevation, left their house constantly flooded. The family had no choice but to move upstairs. Their living space shrank to a tiny room only a few square feet in size. Meanwhile, Frank's father still couldn't find a job. To make matters worse, he got his wife pregnant again, and another child was born. One day, Frank's mother looked at the brothers' worn-out shoes and couldn't hold back her frustration. She scolded her husband, saying he couldn't even stand in line at the relief office to get the boys a new pair of shoes. But once again, his noble pride got in the way. He insisted that accepting charity was no different from competing with beggars. His wife's words offended him. Determined to prove himself, he found an old bicycle tire beside the public restroom. He cut it apart and glued pieces onto the bottoms of the boys' shoes to cover the holes. As he worked, he explained to his sons that he simply chose not to accept handouts. He wasn't as useless as their mother claimed. What he didn't realize was that these repaired shoes, which he made to defend his pride, would cause Frank and his brother endless embarrassment at school. Fortunately, good news finally arrived. Frank's father found a job. That morning, he put on a suit and tie before heading to work. Even though he was only working as a cement laborer, he believed he should look respectable. But on the very first day, Frank and his mother waited outside until dark. His father never came home with food. Late that night, the brothers were awakened by singing. Only then did they realize their father had spent his paycheck getting drunk. Frank covered his ears, hoping to ignore the drunkard. But the moment his father came upstairs, he kicked over the family's chamber pot. The loud crash echoed through the house. The brothers reluctantly got up to check on him. Seeing his sons come out, their father smiled happily. He pulled out the last 2 pennies he had and proudly said he had saved them as a reward for them. The moment the brothers realized he had spent all of his wages, they both immediately said they didn't want the money. By then they had lost all hope in a father who cared more about drinking than his family. That night, their father slept on the staircase. The next morning, he woke up too late for work. As a result, he was fired from the job he had just gotten. For a long time afterward, the family survived only on government assistance. Then, when Frank turned 10 years old, his parents welcomed yet another baby boy. When his grandfather in England heard the news, he mailed them £5 to help out. But even though the brothers stayed close by, their father ordered them to leave. The moment he collected the money,
You're not to go to the pub, Dad. Mom said you're to bring home the money.
You've not to drink the pint.
Now listen. You go home to your mother now.
Dad, give us the money. That money's for the new baby. Dad!
no matter how desperately they pleaded, he walked straight into a pub without looking back. When Frank's mother learned what he had done, she became furious. She immediately told Frank to go to the pub and stand in the middle of the room. She wanted him to tell everyone there that his family had no food left at home, while their father was drinking away the money that was supposed to save them.